Hey everyone, welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. So today's video is going to be pretty straightforward. Just releasing the second season of errated and new faction-specific cards that I put together for a play out of the box format for Warhammer Underworlds. And as I did in my last video, I just want to preface it with a few things that you should know. First thing being the thing I just said, so just play out of the box. So the whole point of the modifications of these house rules that I've been making is to make it so that each warband is play out of the box, meaning that they each have 12 universal cards. I specifically made it so that they each have 6 surges and 6 score in the end phase, or third end phase cards, max 1 third end phase cards for specific factions. Modified in such a way so that they're balanced, or at least they're seemingly balanced between warbands. I realized that it was important that if I was going to balance warbands, I really should balance them all so that they're not just made in a vacuum. Because the only way to make sure that they are comparable to each other is obviously to make tweaks to them while keeping all the other warbands in consideration. So that's what I did. And since I want these warbands to be played out of the box, I'm also making it so they have 22 power cards, 11 gambit, and 11 upgrade, making sure that all of these power cards are useful in some capacity. So all the ones that weren't useful, I modified to make sure that they were useful. And the reason there's 22 power cards instead of 20 is just because some warbands already have 11 gambits and 11 upgrades, and I didn't want to knock any existing cards out of rotation. And finally, since this is a play out of the box home rule format, there will be no universal cards being included into any of these decks. Now, obviously, you can take these decks and decide to custom build and use universal cards and do whatever you want. I really haven't thought through all the possible combinations that could happen if you include universal cards, and I'm sure that it'll lead to some incredibly unbalanced options, which really wasn't my purpose. So the whole goal of this project really was just to have play out of the box format with no deck building. And furthermore, since my balancing efforts aren't perfect, I didn't have a chance to cross play every single warband against each other warband. I'd recommend you play this in a 4-player format, especially since, for particular warbands, the 4-player format really is optimal, like Grashrax, Morgwaits, Garrix Reavers, certain warbands like that. And when I put together the universal cards and balanced them, I really did do so keeping in mind that it was intended for 4-player games. 3-player games are fine also. But if you're going to play 2-player games, you might as well just play with the normal Warhammer Underworlds rules. And this third part is really more of a suggestion that you don't have to include, but I like to play with the mulligan rule change so that, if you draw cards and you don't like them, you don't have to discard an entire deck. You don't have to discard your whole power card deck or objective card deck, but you can in fact just pick and choose which cards you want to get rid of. I feel it's a little bit friendlier and more inviting for new players, and also helps players to kind of start off on equal footing, especially since 4-player games tend to be longer. You tend to not play them 2 out of 3. And last point here is just that this format really is inviting for special game modes. So Warhammer Underworlds has released a lot of special game modes that I don't think get a lot of play, but can be easily included in this house rule style of play out of the box play, such as including hazard cards, which are a lot of fun, using the grand avatar cards, obviously not custom building your decks and warbands, but just taking an existing warband, and if it happens to be chaos, for example, just grabbing the chaos card, and then each player can take a different grand alliance and grab the grand avatar card for that alliance and apply those rules. You can play Apex Predator mode if you want to have a game more focused on combat, which are particularly fun. And this rule is really nice in the sense that, if a warband happens to be falling behind, they still can come back and win the game just by becoming the Apex Predator. If you want to play a cooperative game, you can play against the Glass Mad Gargant pretty easily. And even if you want to go solo, you can go a Crushing Terror and see how you fare with any given play out of the box deck. And is this game better than the original? I mean, obviously that's debatable, but I'm just going to move on and show you the cards that I put together. I photoshopped them all. They're easy to print. All the Season 1 modifications have already been done and released in a separate video, which I'll be including a link for in the description. And these are all the Season 2 cards. So I'll just start by showing the faction-specific cards. So there's Stormsire's Cursebreakers. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I've already released a video, which was the introduction to the play out of the house rules, where I had a document that just summarized all of the modifications that I made. But obviously, I'm going to be making these cards available through a link in the description so you can check them out for yourself. But basically, these are the Stormsire Cursebreakers modified cards that I put together with their backs. So you can just print them front to back, ideally on cardstock, and then laminate them with 5mm laminate. So more Stormsire's Cursebreakers. And then there's Thorns of the Briar Queen. A little bit more, some Zarbag's Gits. Eyes the Nine. Quite a lot for them because they needed heavy modifications. Molog's Mob, Godsworn Hunt, moving on to Iltharis, and then Thundrix Profiteers. I also modified some fighter cards. In the case of Stormsire's Cursebreakers, I just included the errata for the Empower spell action. And these are the backs. Made a little modification to Varclav the Cruel, to Vortimus, to most of the Godsworn Hunt, to Ulthari, and to Thundrick. And obviously you can check out what these changes are. I think that they generally make the game very balanced, but like I said, specifically in this play out of the box format, I wouldn't recommend using these cards to build your own universal decks. And finally, these are the Seasons 2 Tactics Guides, which I've organized so that you can print 2 out per page so you can get kind of a sense about how large they are. And whole purpose of these was just to, on one side, provide players with the lore of a particular warband that they're playing so they get a sense as to what this warband's all about. So I included the official lore, and in the bottom right, I've included a descriptor as to how their Inspire mechanic ties into their lore. These guys, for example, are blue on the right because they're Grand Alliance order, but they're all separated by Grand Alliance. So there's chaos, destruction, and death. And you can see similar things going on for Thorns of the Briar Queen. And on the back of these sheets, I put tactics guides, which I separated into board and unit placement, as well as the general strategy, which I talked about in my last video, which is in the description, and could just give players a sense as to how they should, first of all, place this warband, and then how they can generally play in order to optimize the cards that they will inevitably draw. So I have these for all warbands as well. So you got Stormsires, Thorns, Zarbags, Eyes of the Nine, Mologs, Godsworn Hunt, Iltharis, and Thundrix. And that basically does it. So here's the things you should know synopsis. All the cards will be available in the link, free to download. As I mentioned in my last video, when I play this game, at this point, the majority of the time that I play is through this play out of the box format. That way my friends can just come and grab a warband that interests them, get a sense of their lore, get a sense of how to play them, and then play them in a balanced format. 4 players, it's always fun. We could add special game modes if we want to. And each warband really plays distinctly, meaning that games tend to be very varied, much more so than the normal Warhammer Underworlds, where in a given meta, a lot of people tend to just take the same cards, so there's a lot more predictable things that take place. In this format, things tend to be a lot less predictable. I mean, predictable in the sense that each warband kind of does a predictable thing, but because there's so many warbands and there's such a huge variety of combinations, it does make for really interesting interactions. So that does it. I hope you enjoy. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, please comment below. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and I hope you all have a nice day.